Hi, I'm Carol with the Aphasia Recovery Connection, and I'm really excited to have Lori Bartels-Tobin here with me today. Hi, Lori.
Hi, Carol. How are you?
Good. I know that you've worked with a lot of our Aphasia Recovery Connection clients. Lori has a aphasia center, which is in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is it's an intensive program, and it's a great program for those who want to work really intensely on their speech. And of course, Lori's a speech pathologist. And what I love about you, Lori, and what I often recommend to people when they ask me about getting a therapist is it's just like teachers. Not every teacher can teach history, and not every speech therapist is really good at aphasia. And you happen to be really good at aphasia because that's all you do. You have a whole staff that's what they do is aphasia. So I'm really delighted to have Dr. Bartels with us here today. And then, of course, I'll see her soon. She's coming on the aphasia cruise. I have a question for you that I think a lot of caregivers really want an answer to, or the person with aphasia. And that is, we have therapy in the hospital, and then maybe we get some outpatient, but is there something that they can do to make progress at home?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we do for people when they've been through the program is give them a home program that has a lot of things to work on, or when you're at the program, really kind of bring it to your attention that throughout your day, everybody's really busy and you've got to live life and you've got things to do, but there's little pieces of things that you as a caregiver can do to really help this recovery process along. And so, one of the things that we always tell people to do is, as a caregiver, you kind of get used to maybe speaking for the person with aphasia and asking questions. Or, so many people say to me, oh, I know what he wants because I've known him for 50 years or something like that. And so, there's a point where you want to improve, just kind of go about your life and improve conversation, but there's a way you can take that a little bit step further where it's really going to benefit your loved one with aphasia and really help with that recovery. And that thing that we need to do is, I kind of call it, expect a response, but it's more of, if I say to you, Carol, do you want steak today? And you go, and I just accept that. I haven't really done anything other than assess that you want steak today. Now, in the ideal situation, you would say, "Oh, what would you like today? Would you like steak or fish?" You give somebody some choices, and that's something we'll talk about later. But you have to make that person with aphasia do something. You can't have this passive interaction where you give you do all of the communication. They just have to say a yes or a no, or they can't quite come up with the word, and you say, "Oh, you're talking about Christmas," and they say, "Mm-hmm," and you're like, "Oh, okay," and you just keep going on about your business. They haven't had to do anything other than maybe nod or say yes. You have to put that back on them and say, "Oh, okay, now that I know what you want, you have to say it." So, what are you talking about? And they have to say Christmas. Now, granted, everybody's got different levels of speech or different types of aphasia, that this is a very generic type of thing. And when people are at the aphasia center, we make that very specific as to exactly how that communication is supposed to go. But it's something very easy that as the caregiver, you expect a response other than mm-hmm or yes, no. Even if it's just the yes, no. Okay, tell me, do you want steak? Yes. Some kind of indication. You have to have active involvement, because otherwise, as the person with aphasia, all I have to do is, yeah.
And people aren't going to improve unless they do things that are challenging. So I think sometimes as a caregiver, and I've been a caregiver with David when he was significantly impaired, and initially it's like, yeah, you want to save them and you hate to see them frustrated. So I know he wants a steak, I'll just order it for him and whatnot. But along the way, I learned that helping David every step of the way was not the way to improve his speech. the way to improve his speech was to really challenge him to say the word, first to say one word or one sound, and then, later it was if he could say, two words. I remember the first 3-word sentence he said to me was, he had apraxia, so it was, thank you, Mom. But, oh my God, it was 3 words. And I think so often, and I get it as a caregiver, we want to save them. And what do you think about cueing them? So, for example, if it was we're talking about the steak and somebody really struggled to say the word steak, would you then suggest that you put it in the flow of a sentence like, I would like to have would you suggest cueing them, or it depends on the person?
It depends on the person. What you want to be careful with the cueing is if you get in the habit of doing that type of cueing, you're going to have to do it for eternity. Because whenever somebody does what we call like a phonemic cue, where we're giving you the beginning, you're going to have to do that for eternity. And there's a huge reason behind that. But what we say is, okay, that's not going to help. It's helping them in the moment. So it's helping them right that second. But next time they have to say steak, guess what? You're going to have to do that again. And so you're not really bridging that hierarchy of what you want to do.
And we're not.
You're actually kind of keeping it dependent. So you're kind of keeping it down there. So it's usually an all or nothing type of thing. So if they can't say it, then you guys can work on copying it or writing it. And I know, so these little things throughout the day, sometimes we tell people, you know what, have that specific time of the day where, okay, for the next 30 minutes, this is a therapeutic type of situation. So you're expected to answer, you're expected to do this, because it's really difficult, I know, as a caregiver, when you have 800 other things you have to do, and you just, okay, we just got to get through this. We got to get through it. I don't have time to, okay, we got to take this time to do this. I get that. So it's like, okay, if you have to break it into like, okay, for the next 20 minutes, this is how this is going to go. And then it gets easier to insert naturally into what you're doing. Because one of the things that happens is when you go to speech therapy, and people always complain, oh, they can say this in the therapy room, and then when they're out, they can't do it. And it's like, well, this is the reason why. Because out and about and throughout your life, you're not expected to do this. You're only expected when you're sitting in a very structured environment to say this word steak. But if you like steak, and I don't know, maybe you like your steak rare, then maybe the piece you work on is, how do you want your steak? Rare. But you have to pepper these things, these little bitty lessons throughout the day in context to really make that improvement, so that your loved one with aphasia gets the idea that, oh, this is how this applies. It's not just, oh, I sit here and I work on it in this time. Hey, I want a steak. And over time, this is going to get easier and easier for them. So your original question was how to work on the cueing, and it really depends on the person. Sometimes people just need to see it written, and you can work with them. Sometimes if they have severe apraxia, steak is a really hard one. That's a lot of sounds to sequence. So maybe if they can just get it part of it or get it started, that's the place to go, because everything we do could be broken down into tinier and tinier and tinier pieces that get us towards our goals. So the cueing thing really depends, because everybody's cueing system is slightly different in what they respond to the best. And if they can just repeat after you, that's great. So you want a steak, right? What do you want? Steak.
Yeah.
You can do kind of the fill in the blank thing at the end. That I would only recommend if the person really doesn't have much independent speech whatsoever. Okay. And they really need that time where they're like, okay, it's coming. You're filling in the beginning of that to take that pressure off. Yeah. And then all they got to do is steak at the end. So it really depends. And I know there's lots of different ways to do that, but you have to have them actively involved in the speech process versus passively involved.
And what I've noticed a lot, I run besides Aphasia Recovery Connection, I also do a local support group here in Las Vegas. And what I notice a lot of times is even people that can get out 3 words, 5 words, 7 words, they fall into a pattern of single words, and especially even with their caregivers, I notice a lot, the interaction between them is single word, single word, single word. So a lot of times, I'll be like, hey, I need a complete sentence. Like, let's start with the word I want a steak, So, um, and one of the things that Kim teaches a lot when we're on the cruise is there's a class that she teaches, and she's been a teacher, not a speech therapist, but she's certainly worked with Christine, and that is stretch a sentence where we actually count, I want a steak. Can you say 4 words? And really push people to try to get more words out, and they have to realize they have to challenge themselves. And I know I'll just give another example with David, and I know you've seen this in your intensive program a lot. What happens so often is you ask the person with aphasia a question, and the first thing they do is
yes.
And I always tell people at my stroke group is aphasia is not a head turning disease,
Yeah.
because that's what they do. They like, Mom, save me. And what I've learned to do with David, of course, David speaks really well now after 15 years of therapy, but what I learned to do with David was to force him is if somebody asks him a question, I don't dare look at him because I know he's staring at me like, Mom, save me. Mom, save me. And so like I look at something else and whatnot, and I just wait for him to get the words out because if he was forced to, he could do it. But
yes.
Do you find that too, that a lot of people really want to rely on their caregiver a lot?
Yeah, and that's really one of the reasons that caregivers don't come in until the very last hour of the day to go over homework and watch the therapy and get some training, because that happens. And caregivers get better over time where they're like, oh, I'm not supposed to say anything, or, and what we always say is, okay, sit behind. And if they turn to look, we say, oh, she's not even there. Sorry. So I don't know what you're looking at because there's nobody there. And there's nobody here. It's just me and you to work through this type of thing.
Yeah.
Because there's always the situation where, if we really don't know this and we can't between us, figure it out, then we can ask the caregiver later and say, oh, we couldn't quite figure out, they're talking about somebody. Is it a cousin? We can't quite figure out what the relationship is. But yeah, talking in the sentences, and you actually gave something that's a very good way for some of the people who are non-fluent to get that started, is because if you think of people with non-fluent aphasia, what do they usually have? They have most of the nouns, or they have like that one content word. So it's, back to the steak, it's steak, and if you want the whole thing, you usually have to help because they can't order that sentence. So sometimes people respond very well if we say, okay, I'm going to get it started for you. And then it's like, oh, want a steak. Boom, there it comes out.
Yeah.
But they can't quite figure out how to get that sentence started. And the piece that you have to, this is another good thing that you bring up about I want a steak, that any of the functor words are always going to be much, much harder.
Yeah.
Ignore them in the beginning. Just ignore them, because that's always going to be where somebody messes up and can't repeat it. So if you get somebody that, I can actually repeat a 4-word sentence here all at one time, that and the and the in and on, all of those things are going to go out the window, and people are going to be like, oh, and they're going to get super frustrated because, I just can't remember it. And that's the thing to remember, is that those are always, worry about that much, much, much later downstream. If you say, I want steak, I'm super thrilled, because those little functors, those are things to work on much, much, much later as you get better in the therapy. Don't worry about it when you're because that is going to be such a setback mentally for people that they're going to be like,
And I think you bring a really good point up, is that those nouns, and for people that are really nonverbal, those nouns are the easier ones to get. Mm-hmm. So even when we talk about, okay, you want a steak, for some people then, how do you want it done? Saying well done or rare is really hard, because that's mm-hmm. not like a noun that I always say that anything that you can see, like a glass or a phone, anything that you can see is usually an easier word for them to say. And in the beginning, I think we're trying to build their confidence. So it's really great when somebody can say the word steak and then they start to build their confidence. The other thing that you brought up was that they can't say the little words and ignore them. And I'm really glad you brought that point up, because And I've heard it and you've heard it, and it breaks my heart when I hear this. But when I hear a caregiver or anybody correcting somebody with aphasia, especially in the beginning, on those little words like, that's wrong, like, you should say it like this, because it's so hard to stay motivated as it is. And
Yeah.
when you have somebody saying constantly, that's wrong, you need to say it like this. What we did with David was he would say a lot of things wrong, left and right, he and she, all the little words. So he might say, I store go or whatever. And it's, it's not in the right order, might have the wrong pronoun. But I never said to David, that's wrong. Because, hey, that was 3 words. That's good.
Yeah.
But what I would do then is I would always repeat it. And I would say, oh, I want to go to the store. Great. We'll go to the store. So I always reacted in a really positive way because I never wanted him to get demotivated. Because I think that's really easy to happen, especially when people go out in public. It's hard. I've been with people where people said, what's wrong with you? And it's, because they think they might be on drugs. They think they might be drunk. It's true.
Yeah.
It happens. And then your self-esteem starts to change. And then some people just go in the shell. Like, what the hell? I'll just stay home.
Yeah.
So to recap. So we're talking about caregivers interjecting functional word use throughout the day, as well as maybe 20 or 30 minutes a day of really focusing on whether you're looking at a photo book or talking about a vacation, but talk about something that's of interest to the person with aphasia. Doesn't have to be a worksheet, right?
No, not worksheets.
Yeah, that's what I would say too, not worksheets. And encouraging the person with aphasia to do the talking, and caregivers, please stop trying to jump in. We're trying to save them, I know, because we love them, and it hurts us to see them struggle.
Yeah.
But what you have to realize as a caregiver, if you love them and you want them to improve, they have to go through the pain of the challenges, the frustration. There's no way around it. I think it was Winston Churchill says, the only way through hell is you go through it. And and it's hard to watch somebody go through it. But
and I think it's important to think about, we're not saying like put somebody on the spot and like some sort of like really embarrassing way where you're like, oh no, you have to do it. I know it's hard, but you have to do it. Not like that. More, for example, like we're out here in Seattle right now on an intensive week. And so one of the things throughout the day is, oh, somebody's going to go on their walk after lunch. And we're like, oh, where are you going? Because we know we've worked on the word walk. Where are you going? You're going to go? And they're like, and we're like, no, sorry, that doesn't work. You're here to do speech. So where are you going? And that's like, okay, so this is the expectation. You don't just get to, go throughout your day and just do speech when it's time to do this. It's like, oh, where are you going to go? Walk, or the gym, or, wherever you guys are going. And it's more of like, so it's not a confrontational type of thing per se, where, it's like really stressful to people. It's more of like, oh, are you talking about Carol? Oh, okay. Who are we talking about? You have to say Carol. That's what you have to do. So it's just like in the moment, because you have to activate those things over and over, those words and those concepts. You can't just do it passively because there's no activation going on. The caregiver's done all the work.
Yeah.
As the person with aphasia, I'm not going to get better at that because you're always doing it for me.
Right.
So it's more of like a not confrontational, but, oh, now I know what you're talking about. Now you have to say it. And you can spread that to one word to, it depends on the person. So you can make it whatever you want it to be.
And I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I think it's really hard to be the tutor and the spouse.
Oh,
with your loved one, and you don't want it to get confrontational. You want it to, as much as you can, to be more conversational, less even looking like you're pushing it, but just, hey, we were just talking about Lori. Who were we talking about? Oh, Lori. Okay. Yeah, good. Hey, you got the word out. Lori. Oh, see, you're improving. The more
Mm-hmm.
we can be those cheerleaders, if you think of yourself as a cheerleader, not as the tutor and confrontational, I think the better off for everybody, because motivation can also wane, as I'm sure you've also seen. But anyway,
Well, it's easy.
yeah. So I think we will wrap this little caregiver video up, but I'm hoping, Lori, that we can do some more videos to really share some of your expertise with our Aphasia Recovery Connection caregivers and people with aphasia, and certainly on the cruise. I know I took on the last cruise, Lori was also with us, and I took her class on caregiver tips. And I've been doing this a long time, but it's different when you see somebody who has the professional skill behind her and years and years and years of doing this with a variety of people with aphasia. So, Lori, I really appreciate your expertise and your sharing your knowledge with everybody. If people wanted to get a hold of you or wanted to learn more about the intensive programs, I know right now you're actually doing one in Seattle, but usually you do it in St. Petersburg, Florida, right?
Mm-hmm.
And people
Yes.
come and they live down by the ocean. Not too bad, right?
Yeah.
And then how long are people usually there in general?
It depends. Anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. The average is about 6 weeks, and that's usually the process. I make a recommendation based on someone's application, and then they talk to my assistant Brian, and we get some information. And the process is so my recommendation is typically 6 weeks, but it depends on the person and the situation. And I recommend 6 weeks usually because historically at the 4-week mark, you've just really improved your comprehension so much that you're getting to the point where you're starting to really be able to do some of these things in conversation. And the people that leave at the 4-week mark, it's kind of like, oh, you were just right there to this next piece that we don't get time to do, because the first week is some introduction stuff that lasts the first couple of days. The last week is we've got your graduation, we've got your final conference, we've got your final testing. So there's that kind of eats up some of it too, where usually around 6 weeks though. Some people stay for 8, some people come for 4. And then the best part is that after somebody has already been through our program, whether it's a 4 or an 8 or 6 or an 8, is that when they come back, because most of our clients are returning clients, when they come back, they have the caregiver, the client discount, but then they can say, hey, would it be beneficial for us to do only a 1 or 2 week? Because then we can pick up where we left off and push it again. So our expectations are that people go home, work the home program. Some people see us online. In addition to that, we have, it depends on, we make lots of different recommendations for people that work with their time and their money of how to balance that so they get the most out of it. Then when they come back, you only have to do a 1 or a 2 week maybe, or you can do another 4 week or something, but we can pick that up since we already know you. And we don't have to do a lot of the stuff we had to do the first time. We can just slide right back into it and push you up to the next one. Then you go home and keep working. And so it's a very continuous type of process, because we've realized that that's the best way to do this and to keep people moving forward, is to have this long-term kind of plan for therapy and how they do stuff and when they do it.
And I've seen some of the newer research that's coming out about the intensive programs. I mean, intensive aphasia therapy really works. And unfortunately, a lot of times that's not what Medicare and all of the insurance companies want to look at it that way. And it really is. If you're really motivated and financially you can swing it, I think doing something really intense is a great thing to do. David made really some of his best gains doing some intensive work, and we didn't start that till 3 or 4 years post-stroke, and then 6 and 7 years he was really in an intensive program. And a lot of people say, well, you wouldn't expect gains then. Well, I tell you what, his best improvement came probably year 6 and 7, and that was because he was pushed because of the environment that he was in, because he was working with a lot of speech and language pathologists, because he was in a school that had 80 kids and 5 full-time speech pathologists. So, I mean, he was getting it, adding all day long. So there's always hope. And for people that are really motivated and caregivers that can help guide this along and keep loving and motivating your loved ones with aphasia, we know it's tough. We know. I mean, I've lived this. I always tell people I probably look together now, but I think if you'd seen me even 2 or 3 years post-stroke, I was a wreck. I didn't wear makeup. I looked terrible. If I talked about David, my teeth chattered. I really think aphasia is something that can bring a family to their knees. So, you're talking to Lori and I, and we get it. We know it's hard, but we hope that you found some good tips today from Dr. Lori that you can start to incorporate, and you'll start to feel confident as a caregiver that you too can help make a difference and help your loved one make some progress throughout the day. So thank you so much, and we'll be making more videos so that you can learn more. Bye now.
Bye.